Call this meeting to order. We will begin with item number 2, board consideration and adoption of resolution number 07-21 pertaining to AB-361. This will be with Keith will handle this.
Yes, and this is a bit unusual to do this right at the top of the meeting before the closed session, but let me explain what we're doing. I think the board is aware that up until the end of September, there was an executive order of the governor that allowed us to dispense with certain requirements of the Brown Act to conduct electronic meetings. That timed out at the end of the month. And in the meantime, AB 361 was adopted, which would allow electronic meetings to continue, provided that each agency that wants to do it adopts a resolution making certain findings that it's necessary to do so for health and safety reasons. That's the resolution you have in front of you. Now, I know that seems a little odd because we, as you know, this is a public meeting. We're inviting people to this meeting. So why are we doing this, I guess would be the question. And the goal here is not to change the way that the the agency is currently doing its meetings. But our current meetings do have an electronic component that allows increased public participation from phone-ins, and it does allow for the possibility of our far-flung directors to attend remotely without posting agendas at their locations and having those be open locations as required normally under the Brown Act. So there's some advantage to continuing the practice. In addition to that, primarily we are recommending this for the committees, specifically the TAC committee. After talking about it with staff, it was decided that if we could do the TAC committee purely electronically, that it would be considerable savings for the GA and for the participants. So we're recommending adopting of this resolution. Again, it's a finding that health considerations necessitate social distancing to allow that certain parts of the Brown Act be dispensed with and that electronic meetings be conducted both for the Board of Directors meetings as well as committees of the board. Any questions?
So we'll bring it back to the board. Any questions from directors?
I'll make a motion to approve.
You might want to call for public comment.
Okay. Gotcha.
Director Etnier, any questions?
No questions.
Director Vallejo, any questions?
No questions. I would note that Inyo County and Mono County further north both have recommendations for continued social distancing given the increase in cases locally. And all of our boards up here are also continuing to meet remotely.
Thank you for that. So at this point, we will bring it to public comment. Do we have any public comment on item number 2? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ratora, Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Etnier,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to public comment on closed session. We are now going to move to open session. We will start with item 5A, report out on closed session.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The board met in closed session to discuss the 5 items identified on the agenda. Received a report from the real property negotiators and agency counsel on the respective items. There is nothing to report on any of those items. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you. If everyone will follow me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Brief moment of silence. Next, we will have roll call.
Chairman Heyman,
Present.
Vice Chair Ratora,
Present.
Director Peters, Director Vallejo,
Present.
Director Itmeyer.
Present.
Okay, we'll move to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Go ahead.
Hey, Joshua Nugent on behalf of Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches. And just wanted, I don't think it was on the agenda, so I wanted to address it now that we've been contacted by the Department of Water Resources about the facilitation.
Mr. Nugent, please speak into the microphone.
Oh, that better? There we go.
Much better.
Joshua Nugent on behalf of Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches. I didn't see it on the agenda, so I wanted to address it now. That we look forward to the facilitation services being offered by the Department of Water Resources. We know the Department of Water Resources is watching, and we just wanted to say that we really liked the process when Del Schaefer was here a few years back as part of the facilitation services provided by the DWR. And so if you guys had any comments, if you guys were looking forward to the process as well, I think you've probably been contacted by the facilitation services as well by Mr. Craig Moyle. And so we just wanted to say that we're excited about it and look forward to having Department of Water Resources come in and provide some help. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. We'll move to public comment on the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westolusk. I have a question regarding the minutes for the Policy Advisory Committee. Mr. Lemieux was supposed to provide a form to our chairman, and is that form going to be provided soon so that the chairman has a simplified way to do the minutes?
My apologies. I dropped the ball on that. I will provide it.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other public comment? Okay, seeing no further public comment, we will move to item number 7, consent agenda. Consists of item 7A, approved minutes of the board meeting September 8th, 2021. 7B, conflict waiver letter. 7C, approved expenditures. C1, $54,904.50 to Stetson Engineers. C2, $18,575 to Regional Government Services out of replenishment extraction. Item C3, $17,831.25 to Capital Corps for July and August out of replenishment fee. And item C4, $1,000 to Brown Armstrong out of extraction. Any members of the board wish to pull an item?
Chairman Heyman, as you were reading that, I just wanted to point out that Capital Core Group, where it says July and August, that was on the previous agenda and should have been removed. So
the
that's
entire,
not correct. It's their most recent invoice for services rendered.
Okay, so all of item C3?
Yes, is for 1 month, and that should be services rendered in September.
Okay. Any member of the public wish to have an item removed?
Judy Decker. I don't wish to have an item removed. I note that the money to Stetson Engineers is not identified where it is coming from and would like to have that identification listed.
Judy, we had removed that previously because Stetson Engineers, their invoices are spread amongst all the revenue, so that's why it's not listed.
Looking for a motion to approve the agenda? Oh, I'm sorry. We do have more public comment, so we'll return to public comment on the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee West Lusk. I have a question regarding C4, where it says 1,000 for Brown Armstrong. Can you explain what that expense is?
It's the audit, isn't it?
Renee, this is April. That expense is for the 2020 audit that's currently being conducted.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further public comment?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rotora,
Aye.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 8, Water Resources Manager's Report. This will be with Stetson, Steve Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. This is Steve Johnson with Stetson. First, I'll say thank you to yourself, Mr. Chairman, the board, and the staff, and all the stakeholders. It's good to get back together again. I apologize for not being there in person. I actually had some things come up. I didn't get back into town until late yesterday, and then not unexpectedly, but timing-wise, I have a mediation court hearing starting tomorrow morning, and I still need some prep for that. I just decided that I needed more time to prep for that court hearing tomorrow, rather than spending 4 or 5 hours on the road. So anyway, I apologize for not being there. I will be there in November. We have a fairly concise, on how brief, but fairly concise and brief report, most of it updates on the Water Resource Manager report. I've got Joseph Montoya, who's been giving the reports on the grant funding. Joseph, you're on. If you'd like to go ahead, we're ready.
Thanks, Steve. I'm on. I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. Like Steve said, I'll be reporting on items 8A1 and 2 on the Prop 1 and 68 grant status updates, as well as 8B1, which is an update on the recycled water analysis. So starting with 8A1, we do have an update for invoice 10A. We resubmitted that invoice package on October 1 from direction from DWR to make some minor revisions to some of the mileage rates included in that invoice, and to give DWR some clarification on the eligibility of certain equipment costs that were requested for reimbursement or under the SDAC program, the Water Audit and Leak Detection Program. So that invoice 10A was resubmitted on October 1. As far as we're aware, we haven't received any other requests for clarification on that invoice package, so we're awaiting delivery of the funds for that invoice. Invoice 11A, we submitted that invoice on August 30th in the amount of $69,955.50. Again, we're still awaiting any word from DWR on whether they are requiring additional revisions to that invoice or whether the invoice is good to go. And if you'll recall, we were asked by DWR to prepare some CEQA concurrence documents and an updated environmental information form and a letter certifying no legal challenges to the grant project. Excuse me. We submitted those documents several weeks ago. We received word from DWR on September 13th that CEQA concurrence has been complete and they will not need any additional information. So when we prepare the next invoice package, 12A, at the end of November, we'll be including an amendment to invoices 8A and 9A for reimbursement of some of the costs under the construction and implementation portion of the grant that were removed from invoices 8A and 9A. And those costs totaled around $130,850. $130,850. So that invoice 12A will include those costs. Now moving on to item 8A2, the Prop 68 status update. I don't have anything new to report under here. We're still awaiting payment of invoices 10B and 11B. We have not heard from DWR whether they are needing any clarification on those invoices, so we're still awaiting payment for those. We did submit grant amendment documents to JWR back in late August. We received notice from them that the additional $30,000 under Prop 68 that had been contingent on future appropriations of Prop 1 funding has been made available for us to request reimbursement. We submitted grant amendment documents on August 23rd to include that additional $30,000 in the grant agreement. We have not heard yet from DWR whether the amendment documents are sufficient for execution, so we will still be awaiting a word from DWR on that. So nothing else to report under Prop 68. Next, I'll be moving to item 8B, which is the Recycled Water Program update. We are continuing to work on our alternatives analysis for recycled water. We had a meeting with Krieger and Stewart, the Water District's engineering consultant, on September 29th to go over their comments on the scope of work that we prepared for the analysis. The comments were largely on the evaluation criteria that we're going to be considering during our analysis of each of the recycled water project alternatives. We talked about things like how the alternatives will be impacting the basin water budget, local and regional water levels, and impacts on imported water requirements for the basin. So we continue to work collaboratively with Krieger and Stewart on the priorities to consider in the screening and evaluation process for the alternatives, and how to consider readily available information for each of the alternatives. We're hoping to meet with Krieger and Stewart as well as the city as the official technical team for the recycled water analysis. We're hoping to schedule a meeting sometime in late October to discuss where we're at in the analysis and how to release information to the TAC going forward. Speaking of the TAC, we released the final scope of work with Krieger and Stewart's comments to the TAC. I believe it was yesterday we sent them out to the TAC members. We're hoping to get feedback from them in the next 2 weeks so we can officially finalize the scope of work for the analysis. We have released the first section of the analysis, which is a write-up of the existing facilities and processes at the wastewater treatment plant that the city operates, of the city's existing commitments for providing recycled water for beneficial use, and the city's plans to upgrade and expand the treatment plants. We released that draft of the section to the city several weeks ago, and we received comments from the city. We're working on incorporating those comments. We've been in discussions with the city's consultant, Mike Nunley, about how to incorporate his comments into that section. It says here on the slide we released this section on October 11th. We unfortunately had some delays in getting that section out 2 days ago, so we're hoping to get that section out to the TAC with the city's comments later this week. And we continue to work on the second section of our analysis, which is a characterization of the quantity of effluent from the wastewater plant as well as the quality of water. So far, the work we have done on this section is based on a July 10th tech memo from Provost and Pritchard that projects population trends and wastewater treatment plant flow rates and BOD loading rates in the upgraded wastewater plant. And we're hoping to wrap up that write-up as well as a write-up of the projected secondary effluent quality to the technical team, which will include the city as well as Krieger and Stewart, hopefully around sometime next week. And going forward, we're going to be, as I said, continuing to prepare Section 2 of our analysis, and we'll be working on the next Section 3, which will summarize the analyses or the alternatives that we're going to be considering in our analysis and how those compare to the projects that we described in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And we're going to continue our review and documentation of any regulatory, permitting, environmental, and legal requirements for all of the alternatives that we'll be considering. So that wraps up my report on 8BI, Steve.
Thank you, Joseph. Good report. Couple of things just to add in. Joseph did mention on the Prop 1 funding that the hang-up on the CEQA component with DWR was related to the construction projects. And I'm just going to remind the listeners that that component relates to kind of delayed from the DWR, sort of some delayed notice of some of our projects that may require CEQA documentation for field work, things like the gauging stations, weather and stream gauging, some of the actual field work under the regulations, under the requirements for the Prop 1 funding, that if it required any actual field work to be done, that CEQA providers was required. And I think we were able to bring documents together without having to go through formal CEQA documentation to show either not required or enough compliance to move it forward. So as Joseph mentioned, we think we got that squared away. Another quick item is on the recycled water project, just to give some praise to the group that's working together. I think that the technical group, including Krieger and Stewart Water District consultants and with the Water District and certainly with the city, one of the things that we've coordinated through the technical group collaboratively is to try and scale down the scope of the work as we go forward, as we gather information as to whether or not a certain alternative is viable or not viable, to try and scale back the work going forward and limit the real investigation or the real evaluation to either the highest priority project or highest couple of priority projects for the detailed evaluation. And I think there's a couple of areas that you will see going forward that we've learned from the process agreement on that process. One relating to Searles Valley as a viable source of the use of the treated effluent from the expanded wastewater treatment facility. Information we've learned about how that facility operates, and actually some thanks to the folks out at Searles for granting us the tour and giving us the tour out there that provided some very important information for us going forward. And we're also, I'll just report this now because it's not on the agenda, on the surface percolation replenishment evaluation. We have an internal draft that we look at. I just got it just this week that we're looking at right now. As we go through that process, I think that it will shed some light on where that type of recycled water use would land in our priorities. So we should be releasing that evaluation to the staff team either later this week or next week. And after the staff team review, it will be going out to the TAP for review. So that's going on. There's a couple of those are the last couple of items that Joseph talked about. The next item on the agenda is the shallow well impact mitigation program. And there is a PowerPoint on that. And I'll just hit that real quick. That the report form, as everybody I think is aware, they should be aware, it is posted on the website. It's there for folks that if they have an impact or feel like they've had an impact they want looked at, there is a form there to fill out and submit. We don't have any actual submittals to date on that form. We have received information, just for the record, over the last 6-9 months. We have received information from folks about impacted wells that have been impacted by water levels. directly to us, but no form has been submitted yet. So the process we're taking is we're going to, for the shallow well impact mitigation program, we will operate off of a submitted impact form. As for the program itself, I think everyone is aware that we did take a shot at putting together a description of the program. We've received lots of comments, and lots of comments from TAC members, and from the public. Good comments. One of the things that those comments tended to show us, well, one of the comments we received was that we're expending a lot of effort, which is time and money, to try and describe as much as we can about a program, and through our internal evaluations with our staff team. This is the entire GA staff team from all three of the major representatives on the board. From their staff team evaluation, we have pretty much concluded that the right way to do this is to do what was originally intended, and that is make sure that the final decisions on any shallow well impact mitigation fund usage would be made by the board based upon a staff report that the GA staff would prepare that would be based upon the report form that I described. And so what we've come down to is that trying to describe all the different things and the different ways in which we're going to evaluate a shallow well impact issue, it's better off to put together a brief description of how the process will go forward, what procedures will be followed, and how it would be processed through the staff to the board, ultimately for a board hearing on whatever application is made into the mitigation fund. So that's how we're taking it going forward. So you're going to see something coming back out on the shallow well impact mitigation program. We're working with legal counsel. Keith's working with us directly on it to modify it and streamline it. The goal on this is to make it clear as to how the process works, reduce the cost, and make it more of a case-by-case evaluation basis. Obviously, we want to be consistent and make sure it's clear that the ultimate decision will be at the board level. So that's what I have for that this particular item. I guess we can go to the next item. We'll take any questions at the end. The next item has to do with the policy on temporary use of water. We don't have a PowerPoint for that. I'm just going to give a fairly quick verbal on this. Again, very similar, different situation, but still very similar. The whole intent here is to evaluate temporary emergency uses as they're related to potential groundwater authority pumping fees, replenishment fees and pumping fees. And the issue was actually brought up somewhat by the water district with some issues as to supplying water to different situations that may or may not have replenishment fee or extraction fees applicable to that water use that they're having to pump the water to serve that. So similar to the shallow well impact mitigation program, what the staff team has determined is to provide to the board, again, more of a policy, procedures and processing of how an application for a temporary emergency use might be made to the board, to the staff actually, so the staff can do a staff report and then submit to the board. And under the same light as a shallow well mitigation program, impact mitigation program, the board would then have a hearing on that staff report and make a decision on a case-by-case basis on what's applied for with respect to emergency or temporary water use that may or may not have groundwater authority pumping fees or replenishment fees associated with that. So I think that's all I have, unless Keith had more to add on this, because we're working together on pulling this together. If Keith has anything to add, I guess now would be the time.
I see no questions from Keith. So thank you, Steve. We'll bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments from the board?
None from me.
I have a couple questions. Going to the recycled water program update, there have been two documents released to the TAC, apparently on October 11th. May I ask, when are they going to be released to the PAC and to the public?
I will try to answer it. I don't know that it's a policy issue. If the board would like us to send it to the PAC, we certainly will. As far as the public, after the TAC reviews it, and we get comments, and we generally finalize the information, it would be available to the board, or we would post it on the website. But these are basically progress reports. It's not the final report. Certainly the final report would go through a more rigorous process and then have a presentation in public to the board and be part of your board package.
It's my understanding that the TAC is going to have a meeting later on this month. Is that correct?
We're working on that, Director Otero. We're working on that right now. It likely will be a remote meeting. We're working on the items that would be covered on the agenda, but that is in process. Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess my feeling is it would be nice for the public to know what is going to be discussed at that TAC meeting so they could contribute or at least have the opportunity to contribute. So I would like to see it released before the TAC meeting. I see no reason to keep the information from the public. I mean, if there is a reason, fine. I guess I can't imagine what it might be. I think we should err in the favor of transparency whenever possible. So I'd like to see it released and put on the website.
Yeah, from my perspective, Director Otero, I don't see any reason why the public shouldn't see it either. It's just in process. This is just work in process. So I don't see a problem at all.
Okay, and then on the shallow well impact, I understand there's some major reform revisions being done to the program description, which is fine. Just curious, what time do you expect it to be available to be released to the public? My concern there, by the way, is that it's the shallow well owners who are really impacted by this. So the sooner we can get this to the shallow well owners, the sooner we're going to get some real feedback, is my thinking. So do you have a feel for when that will be available to be put on the website?
Director Otero, I would think we would bring this to the board at the November meeting, ready for approval. And so it would be part of the board package, so it would certainly be public then. And after board approval, it would be posted on the website. That would be our schedule. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't meet that. We're working on it with legal counsel right now.
I guess I would like to see it on the website in draft form so that the public can see it before it comes before the board for approval. The public has to have time to look at it in order to comment to the board. So posting it after the board has acted on it is obviously way too late. So I would like to see it put on the website at least 2 weeks before the next board meeting. Is there a problem with that timeline?
Is this a report that's going in front of the PAC?
No. This is our policy procedures associated with the shallow well program that you and I are working on.
Chairman Heyman, if I may, this is Phil Hall.
Go ahead.
We've had this discussion 3 or 4 times. I'll reiterate, it seems what Director Otero is having an issue with is a design feature, not a defect of the program. The program is individually based. We have a reporting form that if you have a shallow well issue and you think it was caused by overdraft in this basin, you fill out the form, you come to the GA, and we will analyze it. We can't tell you what everything is going to be in every single analysis because every single case will be individual. It's also not an issue of staff. Staff is not going to be making these choices. So they will give us a form, staff will investigate, staff will prepare a report in concert with the person who is filing the document, so the shallow well owner. They will work together to determine what is believed to be the cause, and then it will come to the board for the board to determine if it's a cause that is compensable by the program. This program is a litigation mitigation program. In other words, you have people with shallow wells who think they should and could litigate against the GA, maybe not on that they're right, but that they believe they could and should litigate the damages to their wells because the GA didn't take enough aggressive steps to stop those damages. That's not something for staff to determine in any way, shape, or form, other than to tell the board what we believe the damage actually is, how it occurred, and what it will cost to fix it. They might have other issues, so they're going to bring that to the board. Staff will give you the staff report saying what we believe it is, and that individual will then have a chance to also present to the board, if they have any disagreement with the staff report, what they think it is. So this is not some big program document. This is really an individually based issue of investigation and 5 board members, not staff, determining whether or not it is appropriate to pay out on that claim. It's almost to the extent of being a tort claim, for example, which I'm sure all of your public agency board members are familiar with.
Thank you, Phil. That helps.
That's all very well and good. My feeling is the public has the right to know what we are doing. I haven't seen the program description. I haven't been involved in it. I just want to make sure there are no surprises. That is the issue. So again, I would like to see, as soon as this thing can be put to the public or given to the public, that we do it for the sake of transparency. It is better to err on the side of transparency than to have a surprise. And I see nothing that was said from Phil that would change that argument one iota. So,
Director, Chairman Hammond, if I may again, Director Rator, the application process has been public and is posted on the website, correct me if I'm wrong, April, and has been for almost a full year now, at least since January or so?
No, you're absolutely right. I'm not talking about the application form or the application or the way we fill it out. I'm talking about the process by which we actually use the application. So that's really not relevant. I want to see a transparent program process. So, and I see no reason why the public should not be kept informed.
Director Rator, this is Steve again. At this time, this is just the procedures that we've been following. We would include it in the board packet, which goes to the public for the November meeting. If the board would like to have us distribute publicly prior to putting it in your packet, we could do that as soon as we have it ready. But that's how we would normally do it, is put it in the packet so the public will have it before your board meeting.
But before we take that step, we would want to make sure that we have direction from the full board to do that.
Right.
Right. So,
Director Hammond, if I may ask a question, Director Rator, I'm a little confused here. We could write a paragraph that explains that this will be investigated by staff and you will have a board hearing. I think we've already done that. If you want us to write that paragraph and put it in there, we can. It's sort of already implicit in everything you do as a public hearing. Or are you saying that you want the public hearing that eventually would happen if somebody submitted a shallow well mitigation request to be a public hearing? If you're asking for the second one, that's already baked into the cake. If you're asking for the first one, I guess we can write a paragraph saying that you will get a public hearing, but As I said, I think that's already implicit in the program, and we've been very open about that in public now at least 3 times.
My understanding is that between Steve Johnson and Keith Lemieux, they are putting a process together, written down on a piece of paper. All I'm asking for is that piece of paper be given to the public before it has to be voted on so that we can get proper public input. I don't personally know what is going to be on that piece of paper.
Okay.
So therefore, I can't evaluate that. All I know is I want to be transparent and I want the public to know what we're doing.
Okay, this is Chairman Heyman. So I see no reason to put that on the website ahead of time. We are being transparent. We've discussed that this is going to be a final draft that's going to be presented by Stetson at a certain time. It's going to come before the board. If there's any hidden discrepancies that you're worried about, it will be looked at by the board at that time. There will be public comment for the public to address it at that time. And if there's anything that needs to be addressed, it'll be addressed. So I think it should be moved forward as it stands.
Okay, I'll move on to my next comment. Last month, we had a discussion regarding the transfer of custody of the basin model from the Navy to the GA. Has there been anything done on that?
Director Rotorua, this is Steve again. We are still coordinating that with the Navy right now. The Navy has, they're reviewing, we modified the agreement, basically the agreement for that transfer and use of the model, and the Navy is still reviewing it at this time.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last thing is the water year ended on September 30th. I'm assuming that Stetson is now starting to put together the annual report for water year 2021. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, it's a little quick from into the water, but yeah, we will be preparing the annual report. And in anticipation, Director Rotorua, of your question, yes, we are putting into our schedule to make sure that there's thorough review before it comes to the board, including the board and the committees.
And is there an anticipated date for when it will be given to both the PAC and the TAC?
Joseph's on the line, but he's not necessarily working on this. Heather's working on it, and I don't think she's on the line. I have the date. We have it scheduled. I don't have it in front of me right now, Director Rotorua, but I can forward that to you. I just don't have it in front of me right now. We have set the month ahead from when we want to distribute to make sure that we have thorough review, to make sure we have, I apologize for that, make sure we have thorough review before it does come from to the board.
That's great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we're going to move to Commander Turner. He has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick comment regarding the recycled water program. We took a look at the draft documents the last couple of days and noticed that there was no mention of the easement process as part of that planning process. So we just want to make sure that was taken into consideration because any new connections on Navy property will require that. So that does take a little bit of time to process. I just want to make sure that's included in the planning considerations as we move forward on the recycled water COAs. Over.
Thank you.
We got that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to public comment. Mr. Nugent, go ahead.
On the mic, there we go. Okay, so I just wanted to point out something that's actually within Kern County on the other side of the hills. It's called the Joint Operations Committee, and it was formed as a result of litigation that came out of the Kern River water banks and wells that went dry as a result of pumping during some dry years. They've got a pretty clear, open, transparent process where the person comes in and applies, and they look at the age of the well, the composition of the well, the maintenance of the well. There's kind of a criteria, And then there's a committee and a structure basically by where they come up to with what percentage of which mitigation task should be done is the homeowner's responsibility and what's the members of the water banks their obligation. And so I was also part of the PAC subcommittee assigned towards working on the small well mitigation plan. We met a couple of times, I think at Wes Kassenstein's house. We met at a coffee shop over by the Triangle, by the base. And it was a pretty open and frank discussion, and we talked about similar issues about, is it a well from World War II that used, old steel pipe from after the war? Or, is it something that's a more recent well? And so I think there's actually some pretty good discussions at the PAC. So one suggestion would be is that you could take this almost final draft, send it to the PAC, let them review that, and have that be a way that the public could see it as well. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the desire to get more public input on a small well mitigation program. So thank you.
Could you repeat, what was the agency that had the
So it's the Kern River Bank, Kern River Water Bank Authority, I want to say, but it's called the Joint Operations Committee. I think I pulled it up. It's a good model. I'll actually send April I'll send her a link to it. It's just a good program. It's already been done in Kern County, and so it might be a good model to play off of. So thank you.
Thank you for that input.
Appreciate that, Josh.
Judy Decker. I would like to voice what I think are some of Stan's concerns also. The last time this document on shallow wells came before this board through Stetson Engineers, it was called a well mitigation plan, and it had a lot of details in it as far as the process and the timing for the private well owner. And I got up before your board, I actually presented you a written document, but I said, and I will say again, a private well owner who lives on acreage has his well. That's it. And yet the document you presented talked about this well owner filling out the application, having it be reviewed by staff, having it go before the board, having a public hearing. In the meantime, this private well owner has no water. Totally impractical. I offer to you a method to solve this by having the well owner do what work was necessary to repair his well so he would have water, and then ask for reimbursement. And at that point, you could evaluate the situation. He would have to hire a certified well driller, well repairer in order to do this. You need to be practical in your solutions for solving our water problems. Something might look really good on a piece of paper, but if you haven't experienced having your well go down in the middle of July when it's 120 outside, and your nearest neighbor is a quarter of a mile away, then you don't know what private well owners are dealing with. So please, I like Josh's suggestion that you put this document together and again bring it to the PAC. There were a lot of suggestions given. No one knows which ones you have taken to heart and which ones you thought were nonsense and threw out, or totally impractical or too expensive. So please bring it back to the PAC again for our review. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Don Decker. Am I speaking clearly enough?
A little closer.
A little closer?
There you go.
Okay. This is a comment that is directly related to the discussion just a little bit ago about getting the final report for 2021 to the committees. The very first final report, the 2020, was not reviewed by either committee, and I think it would be worthwhile, and I put this in a comment report to Stetson Engineers, that the committees actually have a task to review 2020, because what many of us see as serious omissions or even ways of analyzing the basin need to be seriously revised for 2021. And it would be worthwhile, that is beneficial to the 2021 report construction, to know what the committees have to offer. And make it clear what I'm talking about. We need to look at 2020 before we look at 2021. It won't be as thorough, I'm certain. We don't have the time available, but there needs to be at least a one pass over. Thank you.
Any further comments from the board? We do have further public comment, so let's go ahead and move to the phones for public comment. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee West of Lusk, and I have two comments. One is on the shallow well mitigation program. I did write a comment on it back on August 6th when the PAC was given the program to review, and one of my real strong concerns, if there's no emergency provision for more frequent review of these, forms that they have to fill out if they're experiencing well problems. And I think there should be possibly a section on the GA board's agenda reserved in case you get any of these shallow well forms submitted, and reserve a portion of it available at your meetings, because having to wait according to the plan or the program document that we were given to review, it can take like a whole year. They only review the applications once a year, and that's way too long. I'm worried about people's wells that are in an emergency situation that just happened suddenly and quickly, and they're without water, waiting for a long time to have the board. And then they also mentioned in the document about more frequent, if necessary, at the June meeting. So you'd only review these applications twice a year. That, to me, is way too long a time, and there may be some well owners that will be suffering, and they need an emergency help now. And that's one of my concerns. And then the other question I have on the recycled water program update, it said next steps. Is there any plan to review to find out if it would be economically feasible to recycle the wastewater treatment effluent to a water quality that's potable, drinkable? I was wondering, is that going to be looked into? And those are my comments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Renee.
I will respond to the last one first, Renee. This is Steve.
Go ahead, Steve.
Currently in California, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Currently in California, direct potable reuse of treated wastewater, even if it's full advanced treatment, they call it fat water, even if it's full advanced treatment water, it's just It's not allowed in California outside of the regulations. I doubt that it will be in the near to distant future ever be used for direct potable. We are looking at treating the water to a level that it will qualify under the regulations, at least for injection, so that it would be injected into the aquifer, blended in the aquifer, and then pumped out along with the other water that is in our basin. There are other projects in California. They don't really work here, at least not right now. Other projects in California where they're at least looking at the possibility of having full advanced treated water. Now, that's beyond tertiary water. The Orange County Water District is doing full advanced treated water. We're looking at it for the San Gabriel Valley, too, where they're looking at full advanced treated water to be then piped to the influent side of a normal, conventional surface water treatment plant, like a surface water treatment plant that takes Colorado River water from the surface, runs it through a treatment facility, and then delivers it direct to customers. There are projects that they're looking at. Those are not even permitted yet either, but we are looking at projects in anticipation that they may be permissible at some time, is to use it in combination with another surface water source at the head of a surface water treatment plant. As you know, our valley does not have a whole lot of surface water to do this with. So the most viable way to get this water into the drinking water source as a drinking water source is the injection, which we're looking at, and along with the water district.
Thank you, Steve. This is Chairman Heyman. I do have a question on the shallow well mitigation policy. Is there a provision for emergency action and decisions for when the need arises for a well?
Was that Chairman?
Chairman Heyman, yes. That question's to you, Steve.
Yeah, we did get comments for that, and we do have them included in our comments. I don't know yet, working with Keith on this, from the staff level. Again, there will be a board decision ultimately. I don't know whether, unless the board would like to direct us to put it in there, that emergency provisions are going to be included in the process, procedures, the policy process, and the procedures for reviewing and writing a staff report on a report form, on an application. I don't know that the emergency provisions are going to be in there or not. We haven't really gotten to that. We do have the comments. We actually prepared a draft section that described emergency procedures and how it might be done, and creating a fund. We've kind of done that before. We discussed internally with the staff that we cannot just hit every alternative. So I don't know that it's going to be in there. If the board wants that in there, we can certainly put it in there. But it is, the program we are anticipating is more of a retroactive program that in arrears helps compensate a well owner that's impacted.
Thank you.
Chairman, this is Phil Hall again, if I may. The problem with emergency is twofold. One, an emergency means the well is no longer working. And I've heard people talk about, hauling water to that person. Most systems, hauling water will be worthless because they will have no pressure and no way to pressurize the system for their home. If you were able to come up with something and somebody came in with an emergency situation to the board and there was a solution where you could haul water and pressurize their home with the hauled water, that would be something the board could look at that moment and decide whether or not it wanted to use mitigation funds that way. A related sort of, is it an emergency or is it proactive looking forward? If I owned a well and I noticed that my well levels have now dropped below my perforations, Steve can be more precise than me, but I think if you're in a situation where you're well and you now have dropped below your perforations, that's the level is below the perforations in the well casing where you get your water, that well is going to rust out pretty quickly. And it could be within a year. In that sort of a situation, we might be mitigating the well damages because the levels have dropped below perforations and get that in before that well goes bad. We all know it will go bad because the perforations will rust out, that well will die shortly. But I think it's about a year and a half, right, Steve? And in that time frame, if you want to call that the emergency situation, the board would have an opportunity, if somebody brought that forward to you, to get them to where they switch over from a well that's going bad and will be bad shortly to the new well through the process. But I don't think that's what you mean by emergency. I think you mean the well is not functioning now, and what do we do? And unfortunately, the answer is plumbing. You still have to pressurize it, so hauling the water probably isn't going to work, at least in most situations.
Thank you. We're going to move back to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Christensen, Kern County. At the direction of Supervisor Peters, the county, which means me, is part of a group in the Central Valley, but it covers all of California, where there's an existing Water Smart program that is provided today for anybody having well problems. So, in fact, Self-Help Enterprises over in they're headquartered in Kern and Tulare County, provides an assessment of wells. They'll provide, and once the assessment is made, water. They can bring in water. They can actually provide water tanks if necessary, and there may be some other funds available to repair wells if it's repairable. So what I'll do is get that put on the website as soon as possible so people can link to that right away. That's a here today, right now available program that'll help in the interim while we develop that. So just FYI, want to get that word out. There is funding available today. They'll come out and look at your well right today. All you have to do is ask. So there's some resources.
That's very good information to hear, and appreciate you bringing that to the forefront, so thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number 9, record retention and destruction policy. This will be given by Keith Lemieux.
Yeah, this is a bit of a housekeeping matter. What you have in front of you is a records retention policy. This is a policy to instruct staff on how to treat, sorry, I just realized I wasn't talking into the microphone. My apologies, Director Vallejo. You don't have to get me. Sorry about that. This is a resolution before you that describes how the staff is to treat, retain, and in some cases dispose of documents sort of precisely. The bylaws say that we are to have a record retention policy. We haven't yet adopted one because, frankly, we don't have any records that would be old enough to be destroyed just yet. But we're anticipating our middle age, I guess, coming up, and so we're getting ready for that with this policy. This was adapted by Jim Worth graciously from the district's policy. It's probably a little more extensive than what we need with our current meager staff, but I guess you can say that it's sized so that if we do grow in staff due to projects and something in the future, this should be able to handle it. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Mr. Lemieux, thanks for speaking into the mic. I'm wondering, just from staff purposes, in terms of the idea of vital records not being allowed to be destroyed, quote unquote, regardless of whether they have been duplicated. I mean, I know there's a big push in a lot of industries, including public agencies, to go digital instead of having hard copies of everything. Is there a thought process behind why a formal process for digitizing these vital records shouldn't be sufficient to keep a copy of those records for official purposes?
Frankly, I hadn't given that any thought.
Okay. I might suggest to the board on that point that we say unless they have been duplicated, and maybe we want to massage the language about making sure they're duplicated in a reliable fashion. But I'm not sure if we want to maintain hard copies just for the sake of maintaining hard copies when we have digital copies available that are reliable. That's just one thought. I'll leave that on the table. And then my other thought, that may be a little more complicated, is with regards to the IT systems. The very last section, IT systems and admin department, speaks to emails and content attached thereto. Specifically with regard to that and the interplay between the fact that we've got this agency, but we are obviously members of other agencies that may or may not have their own email record retention policies. And I know a lot of agencies treat emails, unless they're specifically saved to a folder off the email system, as transitory documents, and they are not official records for purposes of the public records requirement. So I'm wondering if we've thought through any sort of interplay between this record retention policy and how that might conflict with existing record retention policies of the member agencies.
Well, it's an interesting point, because I guess an email sent from one agency to another is a document of both agencies. And truthfully, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's an interesting thought. Your point, though, is that if the other agency is disposing of it, do we need to keep it? Is that the question?
Well, I guess I'm not certain as to who this is applying to. So let's say I have received an email regarding OBGA business that really is, maybe, let's say it's a calendaring email, and I'm going to delete it. Is that going to be, and that's consistent with Inyo County's email record retention policy. Is that going to be now inconsistent with this record retention policy, and how are we going to harmonize those two things?
If I could jump in there real quick, Keith, from my understanding, sending back and forth from Kern County to the GA, emails coming from me are preserved in our county IT system in accordance with our county IT policies, and that would be handled the same on the GA system that receives it in accordance with GA policies.
So in other words, you could safely dispose of the records that are local to the county, and it wouldn't affect whether or not they were disposed of by the GA.
Correct. Yeah. For example, the county right now, as part of ongoing investigation with the state, we're not allowed to delete any emails. So no emails coming or going from our computers are deleted, period. So
I heard a bit about that.
Yeah. So we have to abide by that regardless of what the GA's policy is. So I don't see a big conflict there on how the GA handles those documents. If they're coming from me, they're still preserved in my system according to our policies.
Right, and then the question becomes, does the GA really even have its own email system that the GA maintains emails on that it can control the record retention policy for? Yeah, it's
yeah, not currently. I mean, like I said, this is sort of sized for future organization too. So I guess in that instance, you would dispose of the emails on your county, based on your county policies, and as far as what's kept here, it would just be the email accounts that the staff is currently using. We don't have a separate system.
So I guess my suggestion here then is to maybe make it more specific to emails on the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority's system, if there is one, and make it applicable there.
That's a good suggestion.
Other than that, I didn't have any other comments at this point.
Any other board comments?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move to public comment. Any public comment from the floor?
This is Don Decker again. My comment has to do with cloud conservation of records, digital records. As you all are aware, the business of retention has really pretty much shifted to the digital storage world. The problem, of course, is that whoever is the initiator of the record that's under consideration has no control over the storage that they're paying for. The assumption is it's reliable, but we have many, many examples of the lack of reliability. So my comment is there's still a reason for paper for certain classes of documents.
Any public comment on the phones? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to item number 10.
So are you going to move to approve with the changes, or?
Okay.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
And just to make sure I'm clear, we're good. Is that motion with the changes I suggested, or is that as presented?
With the changes as asked, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rotora,
Aye.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, board consideration of bond counsel agreement with Wolf Hanson. This will be presented by Carol.
There it goes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you have in your packet a resolution and some additional agreements that would authorize, between the Groundwater Authority and Wolf Hanson, and these would authorize the commencement of proceedings in connection with the issuance and sale of securities to finance the acquisition of water rights, retain a municipal advisor, bond counsel, and disclosure counsel, and then would also direct certain activities related to those. So just to give some background, we've had quite a bit of discussion recently, and especially at recent board meetings, with regard to the cost of the replenishment fee, the impact on local residents. As we all know, our local water supplies are insufficient to provide water for our basic needs. We have a groundwater sustainability plan. The basis of that is to bring in some supplemental water to supplement the existing supplies. What we're looking to do with the replenishment fee that was established was to collect approximately $50 million. And we know that the replenishment fee was established in an amount to collect that over a short term, but we've also been aware of the impacts on the community and trying to do that in short order. Consequently, we began some discussions with Wolf Hanson, a municipal advisory firm that specializes in providing financial advice, so that we could consider the ability of the Groundwater Authority to finance the cost of the supplemental water purchase and maybe spread the payments out over a longer period of time. Now we have here a scope of services. I believe the intent here would not be to immediately go to issuing a bond, but rather to hire the consultant to do an analysis bring back our options and then allow the authority to move forward on the best recommendation. We also have with us today Roy Nelson with Wolf Hanson, and if you would like to add something to my report, I would love to hear that.
Only to clarify one thing, and the resolution actually authorizes retaining Wolf Hanson as your municipal advisor and the firm of Quentin Timig as bond counsel and disclosure counsel. I didn't want to blur the facts that we don't give legal advice. We are municipal advisors that work for you, have a relationship with you, present our reports, our findings, our recommendations for you and staff to consider. Based on what you decide, we then potentially move forward to a financing of either a public or private type of financing. And what this resolution does, which Carol accurately stated, it really gets the ball rolling. It doesn't obligate you to issue bonds or securities. It just simply starts the path down a road of seeing what your options are for perhaps financing the Class A water rights.
Great, thank you very much. And if you look at the resolution, you'll also see that generally the advisor's fees are on a contingency basis, and there's a scale that relates the fee to the size of the financing amount. There is, and you should note, a fee that would be charged if the Groundwater Authority decided to terminate the financing due to legal impediments. So just want you to be aware that there is a potential for a fee even if we didn't go forward with this.
And the assumption of that fee is we get down the road of doing a significant amount of work based on representations of the authority and council that we should be able to proceed, and then at the end of the road find out we can't.
So with that, we have a resolution and these agreements for your consideration. Can we answer questions for you?
Okay, any questions from the board?
I'd like to just hold the questions until after we hear from public comment.
Okay. Other board directors want to comment, or you want? I'll move to public comment, and then we'll come back to the board. Okay. So we're going to open up to public comment. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing no public comment from the floor, we'll move to the phones. We do have public comments. So caller, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, caller, go ahead.
Yes, I just am not clear about when the Groundwater Authority has to pay the fees. If Carol could restate when the fees are supposed to be paid. I'm just not unclear looking at the documents. I saw the different breakdowns, like it's $97,000 if you go for 25 to 50 million financing with municipal bonds, and then it's 77,500 if it's 25 million, and then at 15 to 25 it's 57,000. I'm just unclear when the GA is responsible for paying. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, this is Roy Nelson again. Those fees are not aggregated. They are the specific amounts based on what ultimately might be the amount financed. And those fees are payable from the proceeds of the financing. So they, along with all the other costs associated with a normal financing, as would bond counsel and disclosure counsel, printing of a prospectus, any other reports that might be needed to be included in an offering document. So those are payable and contingent on the financing. The only reason for putting in that one fee with respect to the legal was if we were to put in a significant amount of time based on representations that from staff and legal counsel that this should go through, only to find out at the end we can't proceed specifically because of legal impediments, not for any other reason.
And so, Renee, just to clarify, the fees in the schedule would be paid from the proceeds of the financing, and they just depend on how much would be financed.
Okay, so once you got the financing, then the fees will be paid?
Correct. It's a contingent fee that comes out of the proceeds of the financing.
Okay. All right. I understand now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Okay. All right.
Okay, caller, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Caller, go ahead.
Yes, Mike Neal here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. I've got a very strong opposition to the proposition of this, mainly based on the following reason. When the replenishment fee / also folded in with the other fee that was approved improperly, may I add, by the board in the Prop 218 hearing, that fee was presented as collecting fees from both the Water District and Soils Valley to essentially the tune of $5 million each per year. And let me repeat that. I wanted to collect the $10 million total per year, not $50 million immediately. So in proposing this financing, what you're doing is saying that you are admitting that you are have perpetrated a fraud on the public of Ridgecrest by saying we want to collect $10 million a year. Now you're saying, no, we don't want $10 million a year. We want $50 million right now. We want, and on top of that, you want to place the burden for this $50 million being financed on the heads of all of the citizens, all the property owners in this basin. So in spite of the fact that now, what do you have, like 5 lawsuits, another one about to come against you based on the improprieties, the unjustness, the inaccuracies of claims made, and so forth and so on. I could go on for 10 minutes by various entities in this valley who are against, essentially, but basically all fundamentally things that you are trying to do, supposedly to save the water situation in this valley. So I'm going to be writing, and I'm going to be telling the people of this valley that by proposing this financing, you perpetrated a fraud upon them, and maybe somebody wants to bring a lawsuit against you, another lawsuit against you, based on the fact that you improperly and falsely presented to the public that you want to present $10 million, you want to collect $10 million a year, but no, you didn't really want to do that. You wanted to grab $50 million all at once. Now, you know, no wonder you sent Lemieux like a pit bull dog after the Water District on supposedly behalf of the city with his attempt to shame and disgrace them into financing that so you wouldn't have to do it. And oh, by the way, you got nothing. You don't have any basis for getting a $50 million loan. Where do you have to secure even a tenth of that? You're extracting fees from us. The people never wanted to pay, never agreed to, never wanted to happen, and you got no other money. In fact, you're overspending what you're taking in right now. So, you know, if I was a loan officer looking at wanting to loan you money, I would have a good laugh, and then I would say, no, I don't think so, not hardly. So this ought to be voted down right now, and just on its face, it's just absolutely ridiculous. That's all I have to say.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, we will bring it back to the board for comment.
Chairman Heyman, if I may add something, I need to clarify something in the record and correct the record that Mr. Neal just put out there. The notice that was sent out on the replenishment fee clearly provides on the notice itself that these funds, these fee, may be financed, which would lower the monthly cost to the constituents that are paying it. It's clearly provided in the FAQ. There's nothing that should be shocking about this, nothing that should be untoward about this, nothing that anybody shouldn't have foreseen was going to occur if the water district proceeded to not finance its portion of the fee, or frankly, if Cyril's didn't want to. This is the position we're in. This is an attempt, and probably going to be a good attempt, to lower the impacts of the water needs for this community, which haven't been looked at for decades. I mean, we have not bought imported water for this community, and we've known that this community needed it since at least the mid-'90s, when the water district and some of the farmers were in a dispute over whether or not they should adjudicate the basin then. So it shouldn't, again, be shocking that we're looking at financing. It's right there in the replenishment fee notice that was sent to every owner of land in the basin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I'd like to also add that the $10 million a year over a 5-year period equates to the $50 million that we're looking at. So, and yes, it is a way to lower the fee on the constituents. So, thank you.
I do have one comment. You know, the water district went down this path a month, maybe 2 months ago. We spent a good deal of time talking with the bond counsel. Basically came up with the answer that it just isn't going to be doable with the existing environment, with the challenges to the current fee, and a number of other reasons. We could go back through and revisit the paper that the water district wrote. My feeling is we could spend a lot of time doing this. We're going to come up with the same answer that as the water district came up with, is that we need to resolve some of our current issues, including 4 or 5 lawsuits, before we're going to really be able to do any bonding for this. So the water district will not support this. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, this is John Vallejo here. I suppose we'll know if it's feasible when we get the information back from the advisors regarding what rates might be available to Groundwater Authority, given the risks that are inherent in the current situation with regard to lawsuits and all of those challenges. But I think this speaks in a broader picture to the fact that if we're looking to speed up our process for obvious reasons in terms of acquiring water, we should be fast-tracking our process to choosing the project as well. So at this point in time, Inyo County is willing to support this, but we're really looking to see the Groundwater Authority and staff start moving along the actual project decision-making process, because at the end of the day, that's a crucial issue for Inyo County, whether or not we would support acquiring water for a project that we would support versus acquiring water for a project that we wouldn't support. So given that this is a preliminary step in that direction of acquiring water for an unknown project, and given the fact that acquiring water is obviously an important issue for an important element of this region's ability to thrive in the future, we're willing to support the current step, but we really want to see movement on choosing a project as soon as possible, and we want staff to start focusing their efforts in that direction.
Thank you, Director Vallejo. Any other comments from the board?
I'll jump in there real quick. This is Director Peters. I really want to echo what Director Vallejo said. I agree that getting water rights and getting the project laid out as priority number one, and we should be looking at all of our options right now. So as long as this isn't committing us to a certain course, but we're just getting information back, I think that's acceptable. So I would concur with Director Vallejo's comments and support this.
Thank you. I'll just add that I think it's a critical step in our moving forward on purchasing water and what our options to purchase that water are. So I'm in direct favor of it. But any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it forward for a motion.
A motion to approve.
Second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rotora,
No.
Director Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item number 11.
I just wanted to thank everybody, and we look
Yes.
forward to working with you. We'll bring back the information you need.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 11, 6-month check-in with Regional Government Services. Carol, this will be you again.
Yes, that's me again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you have in your packet a 6-month check-in. You remember that back in July we did a 3-month check-in. This is part of our contract between RGS and the Groundwater Authority. And this was largely because at the time that the contract was executed, there wasn't a really good feel for how much staffing time and effort was going to be needed and what all the activities were going to be. So this was basically kind of a progress report, a status check, give you our observations and let you tell us if you see any need for a change in direction. I think the biggest thing that I would like to highlight here, because some of these things you've already seen back in July, we've seen the need and recognized the need and certainly heard from you folks that that we want to put into place a better financing method, basically. Well, I shouldn't say financing method, a better accounting software. And we've been working on basically off of Excel spreadsheets. So one of the projects that we're proposing is to put the GA finances into a new accounting software that RGS is already beginning to use with some of its other agency partners. Now, this wasn't anticipated in the original scope of work, and rather than come back to you with a change in scope for this 12-month contract, because we're approaching the end of the year and we thought this would also better align our activities with your calendar year, was we would like to propose that we bring back a proposal for renewal a little early rather than February when we would normally renew or ask to renew. We're suggesting that it might make sense for us to bring that back to you in December instead, so that we could start with a January 1 agreement, and we could also incorporate then the additional scope for the new accounting software that we would like to put into place. And we're also considering that there might be a need for a small amount of some additional staffing, but this could all be put into the proposal for the coming year. And I think all we're looking for today is just a nod, no official action, but are you good with us bringing back our proposal for renewal a little early in December as opposed to February, so that we can better align with your calendar year and also take into consideration an increased scope for the new accounting software?
Thank you, Carol. We'll bring it to the board. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. I thought I had read earlier when I read through the document that you were going to be hiring or wanted to hire an additional administrative clerk or something like that? Was that in this document?
Well, yes, it refers to us considering that. We haven't, we're still considering our staffing needs internally, so our recommendations would be in what we bring to you in December.
Okay, I guess just for your input, so you can acknowledge this later on when you actually go through, is one of the reasons why the Water District thought very highly of the RGS proposal was the fact that you had your own in-house financial consultants that you can rely on, and one of the things that the Groundwater Authority has needed for a long time is some consistent long-term financial advisor type information, and it sort of sounds like what you've done is transfer some of that responsibility over to the clerk, and I've been watching the invoices on who's been charging, and it looks like you aren't charging very much money at all to the financial advisor or consultant. And I guess at this point in time, when we don't have our 2020 audit yet back, we don't know where we are financially, we don't have a budget in place for next year. What I'm suggesting is that we use your original proposal, and I believe it was like 30 hours a week for financial advisor.
And no, I don't believe it's 30 hours
a month.
His time was actually very minimal.
It was.
I think April's time.
7.5 hours a week, I believe is what.
Yeah, 1.5 hours a week for the accounting manager.
Yeah, 1.5 for accounting manager and 6 hours a week for an accountant, and right now you're at a small fraction of that in terms of what you're really charging. So I guess my feeling is we would like to see the accounting manager and accountant play a more active role rather than hiring additional.
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to understand that the duties that we were considering the need for are not high level. They're not something you would want to pay an accounting manager to do. We're looking for, potentially, again, this is something that we're still considering internally. We've not really determined what our position or proposal would be, but we're looking for someone who might be local to actually give April a little bit of a break or the opportunity to take time off occasionally, because she is the only staff person who's here in Ridgecrest. But the accounting manager basically oversees the activities. We have an accountant who's been putting considerable time into the accounting and the budgeting and also the audit. So, I think we already are taking good advantage of the resources that we have in terms of our financial expertise. We do have April assisting with some of this, a lot of, she's fortunately being able to learn a lot from the expertise and the resources that we have, but she's able to do a lot more of the spreadsheet work and putting numbers onto the sheets, but they're able to give her direction and help her create the forms that we need. So I don't think this is an issue that's that we really need to debate. It's more a matter of where the resources need to be allocated.
Yeah. Well, my concern is obviously more at the product level, making sure that we get our audits done on time and efficiently, making sure that we got our budget done on time and efficiently, and that we actually have a balanced budget. And we have just gotten, you probably have been told that our financial dealings in the last 4 years have been kind of haphazard. We need to formalize it, and we need to get it down. And once we've got a stable system, then that's great. But until we have something that I consider to be a well-thought-through financial process. I want to make sure that we aren't substituting lower-level people for what I think needs to have an accounting manager as well as a real accountant.
I can assure you, we are taking advantage of the financial expertise that
Okay,
we have
thank you.
available to us, and they're providing a great deal of input into our efforts here. Now, and we also are working on budget development. We'll see that presented at our next meeting in November, and the audit is underway. You saw a progress payment in the board packet today.
I'm sorry, what did you say about the audit?
It's underway. You saw a progress payment to the audit firm in our packet today.
Yes. Yes, I did. Do you know when we're actually going to see the audit report?
I do not have a date.
We are still working on getting the documents requested to the auditors.
Okay.
As you know, I'm sure Ty, your CFO, has made you aware, it did take some time last year because we do have to go back and forth through different agencies to acquire certain documents. So we're getting there slowly but surely, but it is underway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, obviously we can't do anything about it now, but obviously getting the 2020 audit would have been nice to have that before we started trying to authorize a 2022 budget. So this is something we've got to work on in the future to make sure we've got consistent scheduling of all of these events. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
I don't believe so. And this doesn't require a vote.
Doesn't require a vote, just kind of a nod to move forward with what has been presented. So I'd just like to add that this is exactly where we wanted to be back when we made the original contract with our RGS, that we would come back and we were rough estimating at the beginning, and that we would come back and do a review and see how things were working out and what areas needed to be addressed and improved upon or added to. So I'm in approval of moving forward on it.
Thank you.
So any public comment on item number 11? Any public comment on the lines? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for an official consensus on moving forward. Director Ittmeyer?
No comment.
Director Vallejo?
You're asking for comments on
Well, not comments, just a nod or approval to move forward with what's been presented.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine with moving forward.
Okay. So I think we're.
I noticed something in there about staff needing, some life balance in there, which is interesting. No, I'm just kidding. It seems appropriate, and it seems like we're getting the services that we need here. So looks good.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus, and yes, we will move forward.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to item number 12, General Manager's Report. And again, Carol, this will be yours.
Okay, well, and this will segue very well into the next item, which is our monthly financial report. So in your packet this month, we've given you a bit of a different report, and I have to say, staff put a considerable amount of effort into having this ready for you for the meeting today. And the idea here, it's a much more abbreviated report than what you saw before, but what we wanted to do was provide clarity to you in terms of the actual revenue sources, what was collected throughout the year, or month by month, and then actual expenses as they relate to those revenue sources or those fees. So I hope this gives you a good feel for where we are and what we've collected for the various fees, the extraction fee, the replenishment fee, fees that are credited to the shallow well mitigation program. Also, what we've collected and spent in terms of our grants. Now, what you won't see here is something that we've talked about before, and that is allocating specific dollars to various tasks, especially with regard to those that our engineer or water resources manager undertakes for us, because there's a lot of activities that Stetson does for us. We've not broken those out here because we've tried to keep this report simple and to show you how those expenditures are reflected in the various fees. Not to say that we're not tracking that information. We are. We do have it available. And if anyone specifically wants to see that, we can provide it. It just was not in an appropriate format to include in a financial statement. And that said, as we work towards our budget reconciliation and development for 2022, we'll be assigning those expenditures to the budget items so that we'll be able to have a good comparison for the coming year proposed budget. But with that, I'm happy to answer questions if I can. April's put a lot of time and effort into this as well, along with our RGS accounting staff, so she's also available to assist.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to thank RGS and Carol in particular for the phone con that we had last week. It's very obvious that you took it seriously, and you obviously did a lot of work in a very short time, which I greatly appreciate. I was in a marathon water district meeting till 10 o'clock last night and didn't get a chance to look at it. I will be giving you some comments hopefully early next week. I apologize for that, but it couldn't be helped. So I guess that's about it. Do appreciate all your hard work.
We appreciate your time as well, Director.
Any other comments from the board? Any public comments on item 12A?
Goodness. Yes, as a member of the public, a paying member of the public, my comment is this. I would like to look at your finance report and be able to see how much money for a given time period you have collected from the replenishment fee and from the pumping fee, and that you have put the replenishment fee monies into a separate account whereby you can show every month that you have so many dollars reserved in that replenishment fee to purchase imported water. We all know that it's a lot more expensive than the finest wine, but the people need to be able to see what you're doing with the money, and they need to be able to see it simply. When you have people come up here that are in the audience who can't even tell you where their water comes from, but they're paying their fees, they need to know where it's going and what's available. Thank you.
My name is Denise Kite, and I ditto what Judy said. I look at this, and I get nothing out of this. You lump everything together. Will your new financial program show things individually against budgeted items?
Chairman Heyman, we can't hear anything that's being said. they need to speak into the microphone, please?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
You'll have to pull it down and
Yes,
get
we
right
can.
up
Thank
on it.
Okay. How's that?
Much better.
Oh, I just dittoed what Judy Decker said. This report, when I look at it, really doesn't mean anything to me. Will your new accounting package go back to historical figures and start from the beginning forward?
No, we will not be trying to bring the legacy data into the new system.
So then you won't have any accurate, per se, I mean, I've looked at some of what your financials have been in the past, and everything is just kind of lumped together, administration. And I realize in a profit and loss statement that you don't break things out. How are you going to bring that information forward so that you know that on this one particular item that you've had your engineer working on, what the exact cost is or has been historically?
I guess I'm not sure I'm following, or I'm not sure how to
Well, if
answer
you had
that.
Stetson do something from the beginning and it was broken out, because I've looked at his bills, they're very detailed. And if you wanted to know what that cost for that particular item on his detailed invoice is, 3 years from now, if you don't add in the historical information, everything seems to be lumped into administration or Stetson bills. Nothing's broken out.
Okay, and in this document, and that's what I said earlier, in this document, that's what we've done, because our intent here was really to show the money collected and paid from the various fees, and we did not try to break it out by specific tasks, because that would have been way too much information, and we tried to put this together on pretty short order.
Correct.
Now, as I said, again, as we do a reconciliation of our 2021 budget and propose a 2022 budget, we will have a better idea of how those costs are to date, and that will give us a basis, I think, for our proposals for the 2022 budget. Now, when we talk about certain expenditures, though, if they're going year to year to year on a particular program, I mean, you're not going to be able to see an accumulated value, because that's just not how the finances would be put together. They're intended to show a particular year, not an accumulation.
But is there going to be some type of a breakdown so that you can look and say, this is what Stetson spent on this, or this is what this agency spent
There
on
will
this?
be a report that can produce that information. And as I noted earlier, we are tracking that. We do have it internally. We can provide it on request, but it wasn't an appropriate document to include in a financial statement.
Okay, well, I can't even determine here where your office expenses are. I'm sure you have some office expenses. I've seen where you're paying the city of Ridgecrest, but there's nothing on here specifically. I guess I'm kind of looking for something that's a little more micro.
Well, I think our invoices are generally in the packet, and they show a pretty good breakdown. RGS has a particular fee, for instance, for administrative costs, so you wouldn't see, for instance, a purchase necessarily of office supplies or things like that. But you can see the detail in the invoices that are in the packet.
So, in other words, if I was me being a person from the public, I would have to look at each packet to try to determine what the expense was and where it was charged to, rather than receiving a report that says this is what this was charged to.
I guess it would depend on what detail you were looking for. What information specifically were you looking for? And I'm not sure how much detail you're asking for.
Well, this doesn't really show me much of anything to try to figure out
and that's what
my money's being spent, where my ratepayer money's being spent. So on your new finance package, will you be issuing reports like this every month, or are they going to be more detailed?
Once we have our new software program in place, we'll be able to provide more standard financial reports.
Okay. And you're hoping that will be when?
It will be sometime next year if our scope of work is approved.
Okay. Can you tell me right now how much money you have in Kern County?
Well,
It's-
right now, today, and
Well,
no.
I mean, as of August 31st, how much money did you have in Kern County?
According to this, the balance is $340,073.
Okay, where am I seeing Kern County funds on here?
If you look at the very bottom of the
Operating
report.
profit, right? Okay.
Mr. Chair, it appears this conversation will be better held offline with this constituent. It doesn't appear to be a public comment anymore at this point. It appears to be more of an inquiry
Well, that's fine.
that may or may not be relevant to the rest of the board's conversation right now.
Okay, Carol, can I meet with you after the meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment from the floor? Okay, we'll move to the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westerlusk, and I'm just making a comment on the next part of Carol's report. It's about the Capital Corps report. In their report, they mention the SB 170 passed, and the governor signed it. In that bill, it was described by the Bakersfield Californian of having
Renee, we haven't.
yeah, I'm just saying repurposing farmland.
Renee, we haven't
I-
discussed, and she hasn't gotten to that.
Yeah, I
topic
just
yet,
wanted to mention if she could expand on her report on that part, the
Okay.
SB 170 by
Well, let's
Capital Corps.
let's hold off on public comment on
Okay.
the next topic until we get to that point. Sorry.
Okay.
Any other public comments online or on the phone? Okay, seeing none, we want to go ahead and move to the next topic, Carol.
Sure. So we have a memo from Capital Corps summarizing their activities for the past month, September. With regard to federal funding, they're still working to position our projects for some federal funding. I think most of their activity really has been focused on the state funding and looking for opportunities for our projects to qualify for some state funding. And I think Jeff Simonetti, I believe, is listening to our meeting. And since we have some specific questions, because I usually go through this pretty briefly, Jeff, would you like to give us a little bit of detail?
Sure. This is Jeff Simonetti with the Capital Corps Group. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Jeff. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So, so we break this down into two main areas. We're still keeping an eye on the infrastructure bill. As everyone has seen, they're still in negotiations on the federal side on moving that forward. But we're getting indications that while this is likely going to be a smaller bill, it's likely planning on moving forward. Related to the questions on the state, there was a matrix in there, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. There was a matrix that we included in our document. There's a question specifically related to Senate Bill 170. That is the budget bill at the state that allocated a total of approximately $5.1 billion associated with water and water infrastructure. There are multiple programs through that that we are looking for potential funding sources, not only for the water connection infrastructure program, but also the recycled water program as well. And they'd be happy to go into further details on that if there are specifics. The last caller too made mention of the farm reprogramming portion, and that specifically pertains to an original bill that was called AB 252, and that got folded into the larger bill that of SB 170 that received funding. There's good news and there's bad news associated with that. The good news is that the bill did get passed, and this specifically pertains to
retiring farmland and would give grant funding for retiring farmland and using that for different purposes. But the challenge that's associated with that is that they had originally asked for $500 million for that program, and it could cut down to $50 million. So it's significantly smaller than the original bill had proposed, but it did get some funding. Other than that, we also had a productive meeting with the United States Navy in late September, where we were able to meet with Paula Monticelli, who is the Director of Basing with the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at Energy Installations and Environment. Also, John Kersey, who is at NAVFAC and is the China Lake Liaison, was there, as well as Dave Janis from the PAC and Ron Strand with the City of Ridgecrest. We had a productive discussion with them, and we'll continue, hopefully, moving forward our discussions on that. And that pretty much wraps up the report, and would be happy to answer any specific other questions that you may have.
So we'll bring back to the board any board comments or questions on item number 12B.
Yes, I noticed somewhere in the report that there was, I think it's in the recycled water area, that both Assembly Member Fong and Senator Grove had some concerns about something dealing with a recycled water grant or loan. Could you maybe clarify or go into a little more detail what that was about?
Yes. So one of the things so we had briefings with both of their staff members last month, and one of the things that they want to make sure that they see is more detail in terms of an analysis of what more specifically the costs are and timing on that project. That's something that we're still working with Stetson on, and is still in the process of getting finalized. But before they make a decision on whether they're going to support that or not, they want to see more details and costs associated with that.
Oh, okay. That sounds reasonable.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, so we are continuing on. So we'll go ahead and move to public comment. Do we have any public comment on item 12B? Okay. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee West-Delusk. I was wondering if the Capital Corps could expand on the retiring farmland grant funding. Is that only for certain regions in the state? Is there any chance our area would be eligible for any of that funding?
Jeff, could you answer Renee's question?
Yes, Renee. So the grant funding is specifically associated with areas that are in critical overdraft and for areas that are within a groundwater sustainability agency. The challenge that's associated with that is it's $50 million that and obviously there are 21 critically overdrafted groundwater basins. So the challenge that's associated with that is that it's a pretty small pot of money that might not go too far in terms of the amount of need that's out there. So we're certainly looking into the possibility of going after that, but we just want to be transparent on the amount of funding that was associated with that, and it got cut by 90%, unfortunately, in the final budget. It was supposed to be $500 million, but it got cut down to 50.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments? I do have one, Jeff, under the Defense Community Infrastructure Program and the amendments to make it a more permanent program. You recommend that Capitol Corps strongly urges the authority in the city of Ridgecrest to support these amendments to the DCIP, and I think that's an important aspect, and anything that we can do as the GA or are we in process of sending our support? Is that something that you follow up on, or the GA itself needs to initiate in the city of Ridgecrest?
So we're working on that internally. So there's two components here. One is looking at the issue related to intergovernmental support agreements. There was some language associated with that's changing that we'd like to address. The second item here too pertains to, in particularly related to the DCIP, is making a change to the language that would allow projects that are on leased land to be eligible for funding. And the reason why that's important to our area is that, as you know, the wastewater treatment plant is on a Navy base, but it has a lease agreement. Under the existing way that the DCIP program is written, that program would not be eligible. But if we can get that language in, it would allow eligibility for making an application to the DCIP for the wastewater treatment plant. So that's why we flag that and think it's something that is important to support, because it would open up another opportunity to potentially get funding for the wastewater treatment plant.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Okay. Seeing no further comment, we will we appreciate your input there, Jeff, and Capitol Corps, and we will move ahead to item number 13, the PAC and TAC report, and that will be with Dave Janik.
Thank you, Chairman. In front of you should have the PAC in your packet, the full PAC report, and I would urge you to read that because there's some good feedback from constituent representatives of the various stakeholders, but I would like to highlight a few key points in it. First, under item 1, Vice Chair Pat Quist has forwarded a resignation in actually the day of the meeting due to time commitments, and she was commended by the panel, by the committee for her service. She was on board the PAC since the beginning, and she's been an outstanding representative of small ag. And her suggestion was, now that small ag candidacy is vacant, representation is vacant on the committee, perhaps someone from the West Brown Road should consider applying to the board itself for potential nomination and appointment to the board to fill her empty seat. We have 12 board representatives. Currently, 9 of them are occupied. So we have large ag, small ag now, and what was the other one? Business interests is the other one. Those are the 3 vacancies we have. And we also haven't seen Tim Carroll, who is, as far as we know, still an active rep for Enniker CSD, but he hasn't made the last 2 meetings. So we have a majority of 5 in order to achieve a quorum. Item number 5, this was the meat of the meeting. We were talking about the recommended changes to the public engagement, communication and engagement plan.
and there were two big conclusions out of the lengthy discussion. One was the PAC members generally agreed that the original plan was a good one, and it was pretty solid, but it's 3 years old, and there are some updates that are required to look at it, and so individual members are going to have a tasking by the next PAC meeting to suggest individual changes and updates and perhaps some technology methods of communication additions that were not in there specifically. The main issue that we identified, the most effective contribution to the plan would be to strongly recommend to the GA board key subject content and focus areas with some methods to be addressed by yourselves, the GA board, in public engagement during the GSP implementation period, which we're now in. These, for example, would focus on controversial issues such as a clear understanding of the GSP implementation alternatives' impact on water uses and user stakeholder individual groups, because there are different impacts for different groups. And so the subcommittee, four-person subcommittee, so we don't violate the Brown Act rules, is off working on that, and we expect them to deliver a set of recommendations for specific subjects and examples, methods too, such as single-page FAQs that would be available at all PAC meetings, all GA meetings, all GA functions. Those types of things we expect them to come back with, but they will not be delivered to the full board until the full PAC has agreed to what they present. So we have two actions that we're going to be pursuing next time, and the third action is we had requested from yourselves, the GA board, your assessment and input on a critique of the communication and engagement plan from your experience over the last 3 years developing the GSP. If you could input that to us, we would like to take all those three things on together at the next meeting. So that's 2 weeks from tomorrow. On the next page, you'll see item number 6, current TAC member representation. We only have 4 active TAC members. And so but they are the most active and have been the most active members since the inception of the TAC. And they've carried a heavy load, and they're still doing it, but they're absent their compadres vacancies that should be able to help them and provide perspective and input if they have certain qualifications, which I'll go over. So we're missing the vacancies, and I wanted to say this for the public. We've got a large ag vacancy, a small ag vacancy, 2 vacancies for business interest, 2 for residential customers of a public water agency, 1 for domestic well owners, 1 for East Kern County Resource Conservation District. And each PAC member, of course, has the ability to nominate a member of the TAC for their own stakeholder group. We are soliciting members to apply to us, to their relevant representative member on the PAC, and it was brought out that people had not been able to find what those qualifications were for the TAC members, and they are located in Article 5 of the GA bylaws, and I quote it here. Quote, members of the TAC must have a formal education and experience in a groundwater-related field and an understanding of the technical aspects of the basin or similar groundwater basins in California. So there are 3 components to the qualification, and folks can meet those at various levels of it, but we need good TAC membership that is willing to engage, qualified, and dedicated, because this is volunteer service. There's no pay for this. It takes a lot of time, but you do get a lot of personal satisfaction out of contributing to your community if you choose to do so. So that's my plea on behalf of the PAC for the TAC and the GA in general. Last item, and I wanted to emphasize this, our future agenda items, we have two that we're going to take on. One are those three functions I mentioned regarding the public communication plan. The individual update of the document itself, the subject focus areas and recommendations, and staff, GA, board, or staff self-critique of the plan and their implementation of it. The second item is to review staff's progress on getting we often call it a POAM. It's not really a POAM in the sense of a formal POAM, but a schedule, integrated schedule for the GA activities itself in preparation that I understand is being undertaken, pulling together the existing ones they have. But we also would like to see it linked expenditures to the schedule items on it. And so that's our second priority right now. With that, that's my summary of the meeting. Open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board?
Excellent report. Thanks, Dan.
So I have one question on the on information from the board pertaining to assessment and critique of the plan itself, or of the issues that are in items that you're going to be looking at putting forth in the communications.
Well, we're looking for your assessment of the plan and any difficulties you encountered, or things you couldn't do, things that expectations that you now know something that was missing, perhaps. So it's a little more open-ended. We're not going to, we don't want to spend, and we don't want Stetson or the general manager to spend a lot of time and money updating what was a good document and changing, everything in it. We want to update a few key things, but focus on key messages. And we have our perceptions about how communication went during the development of the GSP, and the public does as well, and we've heard a lot of them. What was your perception as members of the board and staff that you would like to see perhaps changes or updates or different focus based on what you experienced or weren't able to do? So it's kind of an introspective look back at the plan as it existed, how it was executed, and please give us your assessment.
And you'd like to have that in a 2-week time frame?
Yeah, well, if the meeting is 2 weeks from today, we'd preferably like to have some input, a week before.
About a week. Okay, so all the directors have heard that. We try to get your critique and assessment in this next week.
Yeah, and staff has heard this before. They perhaps have some ideas and thoughts. We're not looking for an exhaustive report. It's something that would aid us and focus us in meeting your expectations.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much for your effort and time. Okay, hearing no further comment from the board, we'll bring it to public comment. Any public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number 14, which is closing comments.
We should probably do a TAC report too.
So we'll back up. We'll stay on item number 13, and we'll follow up with a additional TAC report.
Steve would be the one to cover that.
Steve, you're on.
I can. First of all, David, thank you. Good report. And I just want to offer thanks to David because he's really done a great job chairing that PAC. And it's a very difficult job, and David does an excellent job. But I don't know if Eddie Teasdale is on. Eddie is still the vice chair. We lost Adam Searles as a representative on the TAC. He was the chair, but is Eddie on the line? I don't. I guess you might not be. We did have a call. I had a call with Eddie and Don Decker and Tim Parker. The four of us sort of discussed where we were and where it was going to try and get the TAC back on track. David gave you a very good report on the membership issues right now. They are certainly there. We have gotten some interest. We've received some communications with folks that might be that expressed interest to be on the TAC. We haven't gone through those yet. I still need to get together and figure out what those qualifications are. It's not my call; it would be the board's call. But we would like to bring you the best information available if we do have a qualified candidate. And echoing David's comments, the PAC can certainly nominate members. That's part of the bylaw. So that's one track to go. People can just express an interest. That's another way to go. Again, all with the qualifications that David mentioned. The board can obviously suggest somebody to be on the TAC. So it's really pretty wide open, but there is a definite history and in the bylaws of PAC members nominating members for the TAC. The call we had was very good. What the conclusion of the call generally was, well, I'll let you know to begin with. Everybody wants the TAC to continue. The TAC was originally created to help guide, support, provide input on the development of the GSP for DWR and the Sigma. That's what it was there for. That's written into the bylaws. But there are provisions for the TAC to continue, and there's certainly not only an interest, but a definite need to have the TAC continue to provide input to all of the technical work that is being done by the Groundwater Authority. There was strong interest during our call of everybody there that at some point, as appropriate, as you can see, we have a membership issue, we have a remote meeting issue, we have cost issues trying to support regular, open, public TAC meetings. But there was strong interest, and I'll let everybody know that there continues to be strong interest at the appropriate time to have open TAC meetings that are open to the public too. If we have the right type of documents or the right type of review, draft reports, things that would warrant that type of a meeting, whether it's remote with some people attending in person or it's an in-person meeting, that's on the table. We don't have one scheduled at this time. We have a scheduled hold for the third Thursday of every month during the day would precede the PAC meeting. It would be a noon or 1 o'clock meeting with the PAC, I think, at 5 o'clock. So we have a scheduled hold for the members. We don't have that many members, but we are holding it, on your schedule. At this time, we are, again, trying to finalize the TAC membership. I've got a job to do to reach out. I'm going to have April and probably G. Moran, who has connections with both, reach out to the Navy and BLM to see whether they're interested in continuing to participate as voting or non-voting members. So we have that job to do. We are exchanging we are exchanging potential priority topics for the PAC to address. At this time, we are continuing to identify, as you heard during this meeting, continue to identify draft documents, draft reports, outlines, whatever it is, appropriate technical information to get out to the TAC and get responses back. It has worked, I will say, reasonably well during this whole remote operation process for COVID. It has worked reasonably well. We have people that are interested. David described it very clearly. The most active members, not to say that there aren't others, we've got other people that are very interested. We've got Wes Katzenstein and Nick Panzer and Mike Deal and Judy Decker. We got all other people who are very, very interested to provide comments. But the TAC members we have are certainly very active. We are getting responses. We send stuff out. We are getting responses. So it's working okay. Not as well as it could be. We don't have draft documents that warrant an open meeting where we have the public. We don't have things like that yet. As we do, I'm sure we'll schedule a meeting. And as I said, we are working on making sure we identify the topics that need to be sent out to TAC members to provide input as we go. So longer than I anticipated that to be, but that's where we are with the TAC.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments from the board? Actually, let's back up. We do have a public comment, so we're going to take that first.
Well, I consider myself staff because I'm sort of a staff. Okay. But anyway, just real quickly, and I apologize, but my wife accuses me of being the guy that doesn't want to spend money. It's sort of my orientation to be aware of that. And so as I've watched the meetings and was reminded recently today about the impacts of boards and councils and so on, remember that every time you and I know you know this, but it's just important, I think, to remember every time you ask for an additional finance person, that costs. RGS, we pay for those things, and there's a finite number to that. When we ask for Steve Johnson to do extra work, in fact, this came up at our call with Mr. Watora about identifying. If there are new expenditures, you have to identify those and plan for them in the budget. So if you ask for something, it's just important to remember. And I guess I'm talking to the public too, because this is a hard thing. There aren't unlimited funds, and you get comments about wanting to do something, and then you also get comments from the public about why are we spending so much money. So this is sort of where the rubber hits the road, making those decisions. Sometimes the public has great ideas. Sometimes the public doesn't understand the financial implications of providing a really detailed report for one member of the public who sincerely wants it, but it has a cost. Under a similar cost item, I've heard several times, let's send that to the PAC and the TAC. And where in some cases that one of staff's job is to check assumptions, right? We assume that that's what we ought to do. But remember, you have a PAC and a TAC for a reason. If you're going to send it to the PAC and the TAC every time, why have a PAC and a TAC? Have a PAC-TAC, whatever. I mean, it's one group. So my suggestion is that perhaps when staff is going to send something, they put in the report. Not that there's 100 things you probably think you should be doing, but you put that in the report and it's referred there. In some cases, it will be to both, because it has policy and technical implications. But remember, when you send it to both, you send Steve Johnson's hourly people to that meeting, and it costs money. I love Dave Janis's comment about let's not spend a lot of money. Let's be smart about how we spend the money. So just a reminder, as from the guy that doesn't like to spend money. So that's my comments.
Thank you.
And I'll just say, from my position, Steve Johnson, I appreciate that comment, because there is trying to support the requests that are made. It is time consuming, and we do have other obligations, other things that we're trying to get done too. But supporting, for example, we back completely off of the PAC, other than general communication with David or with April and Carol and the staff, completely out of the PAC, which is good. We've reduced our involvement there a lot. The way the TAC is working now, I feel, I said reasonable, it's not great. I feel we are getting good technical input by email and keeping people included and making sure we get the right items out there for them to look at. That's minimal effort on our part to get it out there and get their comments back and address them, as opposed to trying to set up a meeting and have minutes and reports and all that. So I echo Alan's concerns totally.
Yes, Judy Decker again. I believe that this board, it might not have been you 5 people, but that this board approved a member for the TAC from Sills Valley Minerals. I don't know his last name. I believe his first name is Stephen. So that's something that needs to be checked up on. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
I just wanted to clarify that the SVM rep who does serve on the TAC was appointed, but he receives all the correspondence, so it has been their decision to not remain involved. I haven't heard anything from him. So,
okay.
But he is on the distribution emails.
Okay. Any other public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none. And I assume there's no further comment from the board. Okay, with that, we will move to item 14, closing comments, and we will begin with Commander Turner.
No comments.
Mr. Rotorua?
Yes, thank you. Something that Don Decker said earlier that got my attention, and that was to assign the 2020 annual report to the TAC for review. It didn't get reviewed last year officially because it didn't get to them in time to actually review it. My feeling is that's a good idea because any comment that they have from last year, anybody has, is going to be relevant probably to the draft report that comes out for this year, and we can get ahead of the game by asking the TAC to review the 2020 report now and then give that information to Steve Johnson. Now, otherwise, if we don't want to assign the TAC to do that, we could just have individual TAC members write down their comments, questions, and that kind of thing, and send them directly to Steve Johnson, although, again, I like the idea of doing it as the TAC so they can come to a consensus, and that consensus can go to Steve Johnson. So that I think was an excellent idea, and I appreciate you bringing that up. The other thing, two other items that I'm very concerned about, and I know Carol already understands this, is the audit for 2020. We need to get that out. I was hoping we'd have it out before we had to do the 2022 budget, but right now I guess I'm not real optimistic, but so be it. We'll know better next year. Also, the budget itself. Assuming we don't have the new software in place, which it sounds like we won't now, we'll have to make do. But we do need to make sure that we have a balanced budget, and we know what that balance is. And I think that's something that we have not done in the past very well, quite frankly. So appreciate your diligence in getting us back on track. Thank you.
Okay, I know that Tom Bukowskis with BLM is temporarily out of the area, but did we have anyone else standing in for BLM at this time? I don't think so. I just don't want to miss him, and I think we're good. So, okay, I don't have any further comments. Did you have a comment, Dave?
I guess not.
I would just like to say that I appreciate Alan's input. I think that is important that we're mindful of using our resources that we have as efficiently as possible. But I do appreciate all the input that we've gotten, and I commend Dave Janis on leading the charge on that and keeping us updated, and it's much appreciated.
Director Ittner?
No comments.
Director Vallejo?
Regarding future business, I note that the bylaws, Section 3, speak to rotating of chairs and legal counsel. I've been paying attention to water district meetings recently, and there's been some interesting and somewhat concerning posturing, at least, from some of the board members regarding the activities of this agency, as well as legal actions taken by the water district and legal filings made by the water district in different ongoing lawsuits that make me wonder if there should be a consideration of the order of succession for chair and staffing of legal counsel for the Groundwater Authority in the next calendar year. I'd ask that staff meet with water district staff to discuss that issue, and if there isn't a resolution or a meeting of the minds on changing the order, then this should be brought back to this board for the board consideration, because the board ultimately does have the authority to make the determination of who is going to be staffing and chairing the meetings.
Very good. Now, do we need any further approval from the board on putting that on in motion?
Well, it's not on the agenda, and I mean, normally we would need direction from, the full board.
So I guess my request for my direction is regarding a future board business item. I mean, this could be brought back to the board as a business item on the next agenda, and if that's the limit of what we can do today, I fully understand and appreciate that. But I think it's something that we need to consider ahead of time before we get to January.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but I think we could consider that just a referral to staff to have those discussions, and then
Is that what the board would like, to refer this to staff?
I'm in agreement with it.
Yeah, would that satisfy kind of what you're talking about, Director Vallejo?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the board will be able to weigh in on this if there isn't kind of a voluntary approach here before we get to January.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure for consistency that we were getting direction from a majority of the board and not a single board member, but it sounds like a majority of the board would like the staff to talk.
Very good. And I don't have any further comment, so thank you, everybody, for participating today in the public comment and all the hard work. And as of that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.